what we're saying here is that, there are various and sometimes numerous causes and symptoms surrounding isolation. And what we're not saying is you shouldn't feel that way.
Oh,
right?
Thank you for saying it that way.
Yeah.
So
we are
so
not
important.
saying that.
As a matter of fact, it's just the opposite.
Absolutely.
We want to validate these feelings.
Yes.
We want to say, okay, there's a reason, there's a
Right.
root, there's causes.
With God, there is always more. More love, more life, more freedom. Welcome to Zoweh's Exploring More with Michael Thompson. C.S. Lewis once wrote, "Our Heavenly Father has provided many delightful inns for us along our journey, but He takes great care to see that we do not mistake any of them for home." Join me and the team as we explore the kingdom together, discovering the deep truths and offering encouragement for the journey. There is always more.
Welcome, friends and allies, to the Exploring More podcast. I'm Michael Thompson, hanging out with SJ, the one and only. And
Thank goodness.
Here to explore more, right, in the kingdom. And try to continue this exploration on isolation and having the opportunity to have the ladies in and talk, and being able to identify and name and put this thing. The wild thing, I was going to say this, the kind of the elephant in the room within so much of culture and how so many people are feeling this, experiencing this.
Yep.
And yet you use that term, elephant in the room when it's an obvious thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I think this is more, is it dubious?
Yeah. Deceptive.
Yeah.
It can kind of sneak up on you.
Very much.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought in this episode, we could turn into, SJ, just some hope and some help.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
we've talked a lot about symptoms, causes, the effects. So how do we come up out of it?
Yeah. It's multifaceted. It can be a lot of different things. You had a season, a couple seasons ago, not even a full year, where there was 6 deaths in your world.
First 7 months of 2022.
Yeah. Collectively, that will take a toll.
Sure.
And each one of those people and a pet, each one of them has a place that can make it very challenging, even by themselves, but consecutively and collectively. How do you process this? And so, how a person finds themselves isolated, I just want to honor that and say, man, there's a lot of different things.
Absolutely.
That can come at us in this fallen place, fallen humanity, life outside the garden, that is, traumatizing to the soul, bruising to the heart, challenging to I do this to process.
Yeah, just to your daily functions. I mean, I what occurs to me, Michael, is a couple of things. I'm in this season 2 of learning how to feel what I'm feeling.
Yeah, which is part of this.
Yeah, you were great when I was up and sharing at Heart of a Warrior West last month, or however long ago it was now. At just affirming for that. But I do want to say what we're saying here is that, there are various and sometimes numerous causes and symptoms surrounding isolation. And what we're not saying is you shouldn't feel that way.
Oh,
right?
thank you for saying it that way.
Yeah.
So
We are
so
not
important.
saying that.
As a matter of fact, it's just the opposite.
Absolutely.
We
the
want to
opposite.
validate these feelings.
Yes.
We want to say, okay, there's a reason, there's a
Right.
root, there's causes, and so in this episode, as we try to bring some encouragement. I've got 4 or 5 ideas and practical things from my own story, but even when you put a to-do list across the table, or you offer some kind of well, do this, do that. It can really sound trite, and I don't want that to happen. I don't want listeners to feel that way. Or
no, we're not going to give. Here's your 5 best tips for ending isolation in your life.
Right.
I mean, this is
makes
not
for a great article. I think I would read that. I would read it. Maybe we could write it. But I think, if you can follow me a little bit and we can share some of our stories. I would just start with the very first thing is to give grace and give kindness to you.
Mm-hmm.
That I think of that passage, love one another, and love your neighbor as you love yourself, and self-care, and being able to the capacity to love is so arrested in isolation, and the person that really needs to be taken care of, even though you may have responsibilities for a lot of other people and a lot of other things. And so somehow, some way, I think that big courageous step is to, how do you care for you? How do you take care of you? So if you can get permission to do that, if you can be allowed or invited to do that, then I think there's a few other things that kind of come on the heels of that.
Sure. Yeah. I think about, as you're talking about your ability to give love is arrested, even to yourself. Yeah. That just makes me think, like, how am I going to receive love for myself in that moment? How am I going to provide? If you're feeling isolated, you're feeling alone, it's not, maybe you don't feel like there's someone there that can help you with that. So again, not a pull yourself up by your bootstraps moment, but what is the one thing that you can do in the area of self-care today? Maybe it's go for a walk. Maybe I don't know what it is, but that always helps me, like getting out and moving.
Yeah.
And getting into a routine of, if I take a 15 or 20 minute walk, my mood gets elevated immediately, so, but that's me. So what is the one thing, that you can do when you start to kind of feel this come on? What's the one thing that you could do that's loving for you? One of your favorite things to do,
Yeah.
it's a great, you can answer that question,
Yeah.
but I'm saying to my audience, our audience, that's a great place to start, I think.
Yeah. To know that your will has somehow been hijacked or arrested, to be able to make a choice, because isolation has these elements, right, with it they're exchangeable. So if you feel depressed, if you're experiencing depression, then you are likely in a place of isolation. If you're in a place of isolation, it can be due to fear. It can be due to depression. It can be due to emotional trauma. It can be due to an incline in your life over a season, over time, that has just worn you out.
Right.
So, to honor all of that is really part of how I want to kick off, and then, to your point, to summon your will to move to a outside. It sounds, again, so courageous when you're living, or when I've been overcome with fear. It is very, very difficult to summon that strength, that courage, and that ability to move and get literally physically somewhere else other than with my thoughts or subject to the thoughts of the enemy that is just kind of just boom,
yes,
boom, boom.
yes, constantly.
And
the thing
and
you're
just,
trying
in your
to
head, you just kind of keep taking it, and you're like, "What's wrong?" And,
Yeah.
and you know, and,
You're
and
punch
if
drunk.
you're watching that, if it was something you were watching happen to say, like, get up, run away. This mechanical thing is going to keep doing that. Just get out of the chair,
right.
And yet it doesn't feel like when you're in isolation and experiencing some of these different ingredients that are added to it, that you have the capacity to do that. So, and yet it's one of the most loving things you can do for yourself is to engage, summon a little bit of strength, move away from a place that darkness has the upper hand.
Yeah, so I don't want to go into, again, we want to be really careful about not making it sound like, well, here's the list of things you should do, right?
Yeah.
But I think when you're in that scenario, getting punched in the nose over and over again, it can feel like the resolution of the issue or overcoming that feeling is just, it's too enormous. It's too... You're trying to, you've got a one rifle and you're saying, well, I'm going to invade Germany and, just me and my rifle,
overcome this enemy.
And
I have one bullet.
Exactly. So I go back to, the one thing that popped into my head was a guy that we listened to and love some of his stuff, Jordan Peterson. He wrote a book for 6 Rules for Life. Get up and make your bed. And if you can get up and make your bed in the morning, and maybe it's not making your bed, maybe it's something else. Yeah. But I think what we're saying and what we're trying to encourage people with is this idea, like, you don't have to solve all of your problems to start moving in a positive direction and getting out of isolation. You can do these things that are self-care, taking a walk, making the bed, whatever it is for you, picking up a different book, listening to a different podcast, engaging in some self-care that moves you in the positive direction towards coming up out of this hole.
Yeah.
The irony too of social media, as being a way to connect us and how isolating it is.
Yeah.
And can be.
Yeah.
But at the same time, maybe that's a way to engage with somebody, join up with a group or. So I think the point is, you don't have to try to solve the entirety of the problem to move in a positive direction.
Yeah. Step an inch. It is as funny as it sounds. The what about Bob? Baby stepping. That whole idea.
Oh man, that
movie is as funny as it was. There's a reality to it, and I think so. So your will's going to matter.
Look up on YouTube. Look up baby steps and what about Bob? You'll see the clip that Michael's talking about.
And so this engaging of your will, very, very critical.
Yeah.
And then what you do with it, if it's some tasks or chores or just some little things that you can accomplish, that's what Peterson was talking about. Can you make breakfast? Can you eat breakfast? Can you make your bed? Can you move towards a shower or cleaning up or shaving? I mean, there's just some of those things that can be very hard to do, and yet that's a way to move at them. So
moving towards victory,
moving towards something that failure is such a another one of the, I guess, results of isolation. There's and it gets swirling around too. That the voices of failure, the voices of condemnation, the voices that you get subject to in isolation. So your will really is significant if you can summon the courage to move into some self-care. And then I want to talk about another one within that place of will and choice and strength and the ability to move would be towards someone else.
Right.
Right. Robin and Sherry and I talked quite a bit about how dangerous that can even be.
Sure.
Because who you're going to entrust. So I want to call upon a person's wisdom if to expect somebody to handle your heart well when you are wrestling through isolation, and you've known that their track record kind of you know them well enough to kind of know what they're going to say, and that's not what you need, then don't ask them. Don't you may have to find somebody outside of kind of that family, or maybe you have wounders that are part of getting you into isolation. They're not going to be the most helpful people to get you out of there.
No.
So I would call upon wisdom to who you invite and who you ask. But if having a conversation with somebody is connecting with somebody and somebody's there who can listen, this might be the time for professional help. This might be the time to find a Christian counselor, or to find, go to our website. We have a host of counselors listed at Zoweh.org, and people that we have seen, people that we trust, people that we would even promote to enter into conversations and begin to relate to somebody, share your story, unpack what's happened, and get some help. I think that's probably one of the biggest things I could say, SJ, for anybody in isolation. It feels safer to stay in the shadows and in the darker spaces, when in truth, the movement, the attempt to move towards somebody, and be careful who you move toward. But in this case, and maybe we can talk about our experience, it might be worth paying somebody to listen to you.
Sure.
And enter into that conversation. Have you experienced anything within the counselor space that I know you've flown some places to be with some friends and allies to talk and be with? So I'm not trying to tee you up for any one thing, but I just think it's important that we share. Hey, we've been in this pit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm kind of a gearhead, Michael. So I immediately think of I can change spark plugs, I can do a tune up, I can do some various things, but there's a point where it's beyond my skill set, right? Mm-hmm. And it's not wise to try to enter into something that's outside of my ability, or to try to figure out on my own.
Right.
So I flew out to Colorado and spent some time with our friends Gary and Lee several months ago, and that was even before that period of grief. In the early part of 2022, that was the end of 21, and coming out of being laid out by COVID pretty badly, and some unraveling of my own story that happened there. My transactional relationship style, which was I arranged for love by doing things for people, that started 45 years ago when I was a kid. When you can't even get up off the bed, and can barely walk into the living room. Then how do you arrange for love? And when you're like that for 3+ weeks because you're so sick, God
your whole
has
system,
a tendency
your whole system's crashing.
It's crashing,
and it's probably
man.
a good thing.
Yeah, really, at the end of the day, it's definitely been a good thing, but it can feel, it can bring on a feeling of desperation in the midst of that. So, God, I think in his way, is oftentimes provoking things and uncovering some things, and encouraging us to enter into some things when we're at some of the lowest points in our life.
Yeah.
And so, with your encouragement, reached out to those guys, and it was great, man. We spent a day and a half together, and all they wanted to talk about was me, which even just that in and of itself, and within the first couple of hours,
Yeah.
I was struck and actually quite emotional about that kind of focus.
attention. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so it was very helpful in unraveling some things and helping me to see some things. And I will say too, it wasn't a quick fix. It wasn't a cure all. I still had to, like you said earlier, engage my will in some things. But one step at a time. We kind of unraveled some things.
Yeah, there's a principle in this that I feel like I want to just touch on. Genesis 2:18. God has created everything, and it's not good for Adam to be alone. And so this idea of aloneness and loneliness and in some way a synonym for isolation.
Sure.
And I do believe this. I believe this deeply that those steps that you make towards resolve are met by God's provision. And again, it's a delicate matter, to how far does he go? How far do you go? Where does that meet? And what was accomplished? And I don't feel any better. And so, where's God in this? Those are all real issues and real places.
Yeah.
But there's a neurological component to this.
There is
physiologically. I mean, you get that rhythm and system going in the wrong direction and support it with behavior. It really, isolation becomes a way of living, not just some condition that you're dealing with.
Right.
And then there's the spiritual element of it. We talked about our friend who believed, and we've taught this on many podcasts, what you believe matters. It has authority in your life. And
sure.
His wounding and father wounding because of his dad's inability to see him and engage with him, the message of the father wound to him was, you're invisible. And here he is 40 years later, because he's in his 60s, that's operational and actually working to isolate him in some spaces that what's being offered is friendship and connection and story and
yet
so
his
many different
training.
Things. Yes, that's what I'm trying to say.
Yes, it leads him to agree with the lie he's been told for 45 years.
So one of the solutions I'm proposing is, what's in the system?
Right.
What have you believed about yourself or about God or about others? Any kind of work towards healing. Again, you're summoning some kind of courage to even explore there. But the Heart of a Warrior book, Search and Rescue, the book. I mean, we have
Sacred Romance.
Sacred Romance
is a great one.
There's Gary's book, It's Your Call.
It's Your Call.
Some exploration of how this works on multiple fronts is really worth your time. Again, reading a book or prescribing a book sounds like, well, I need something now. I need something today. I need help now. But I'm saying I think it's got to be part of the solution package of ways in which someone can begin to become oriented. We talk a lot about orientation, because if the enemy has a hold here, if he has got his lies deeply supplanted in the psyche, in the heart, in the way that a person's thinking, that isolation's not going away for very long. It's just too easy for the enemy to yank the chain, and that's what you want to get rid of. What is that chain? What do they have here? What have I believed about myself? So work there, either through the journal workbooks, diving deeper into healing and the opportunity to see how lies work in the human heart, in the human story, in the image bearer's life. That's a great place to go to to begin to bring some remedy to these feelings that come along with such dark statements pronounced over us,
Right.
and to come out from under those.
Yeah, I'm immediately thinking, again, everyone that's listened for any length of time, but even new listeners, I'm kind of a word picture guy. We speak in metaphors a lot because I think they're helpful. What I'm thinking of while you're sharing is, being in a pit that kind of has this gradual slope to it, and it's mud,
Mm-hmm.
and you're trying to clamber up out of that hole, and
you
just keep sliding back, and then you might get a little bit and you slide back. But I do want to encourage folks, it can feel that way. And we want to encourage you to feel the things that you're feeling. But at the same time, I want to encourage, because I need the encouragement too, is folks to have a discerning heart, right? And what does it mean to have a discerning heart? And when you feel like you're sliding back down in there, who's telling you the lie that's making you slide back in?
Yeah.
Just because you reach out to somebody and it doesn't go so well, see what happens when you reach out? I'm going to get hurt again. Okay, this person isn't the person to reach out to. Who's another person?
Yeah.
Who email exploringmore@zoweh.org, right? We'll try to connect you with someone.
We'll do our best.
I understand the self-perpetuation that it can feel like, you're just tired of trying in many cases with this isolation and sliding back down into the hole. But there is a way out. And so, what, Michael, have you found to be when you felt isolated? Because I know you went through a bout of that too, especially after having COVID, and it kind of isolated all of us. And I hate to keep talking about it, but it was such an impactful part of our lives. It's just a truth.
Yeah.
So what did you find personally effective in kind of, pulling yourself up? Okay, I'm sliding back down this slope. Somebody who threw you a rope?
Yeah.
How did you fashion a rope, to pull yourself out of that pit? What did that look like?
Yeah. I've got a big answer for that, I think, and I appreciate the question. I think this would be a good break. We can take a deep breath, let the listeners take a deep breath, and we can come back and I will jump on that story because, I think some of the things that I found helpful, I want to share those and I can share them now because the question in a story that there were elements, different pieces that, not just one thing, some different pieces that brought me through some of that time. So how about that? We'll be right back.
We hope you have enjoyed this episode of Exploring More. The landing page for this podcast is zoweh.org/podcast. That's ZOWEH.org/podcast, where you can find the show notes and various platforms to which we broadcast. You can also find us and the Life of More by visiting Zoweh on YouVersion Bible app, Right Now Media, our Facebook page, and Zoweh on Instagram and Twitter. Remember, with God there is always more, and you were made for more.